Hi everybody, today we're doing a quick overview of the 3DStreet app. It's a super powerful, user-friendly 3DStreet editor tool, and it's super easy to use, very fun, and is really powerful for those of us who might be working in the urban design or city planning space, and additionally those of us who might not be formally trained and are just trying to make an impact in our community and sort of come up with some visioning and ideation for what our streets could look like. This is a super fun and awesome tool for folks to be able to use. This video is going to be a quick rundown of the user interface for the 3DStreet app, the kinds of tools that are available in the app, as well as the street elements that you can expect to find so that you can begin to create these awesome 3D streetscapes. Let's talk about what we're going to do when we open up 3DStreet for the very first time. First, we're going to head to the website, 3dstreet.app. Once we have the website opened up, we have a few different options about how to create our first streetscape. The first, and what I would suggest for most folks, is heading to a site called Streetmix. I highly encourage that you check it out. What you can do is set up a Streetmix in this site that'll basically be a 2D version of what will eventually be transported into 3DStreet. Once you have created the Streetmix that you think is really cool and you would like to see in 3D, you can head up to Share and then click Open in 3DStreet. Then 3DStreet will render a 3D version of the Streetmix you just created, and you'll be free to edit and create from it as you please. Alternatively, you could open up your Streetmix from the 3DStreet side by loading in the link of your Streetmix. And lastly, an option that you have is to go into community scenes and see what other 3DStreet app users are developing and creating in their own communities, and take one of these and adapt it to your own uses. All right, now let's cover some of the tools that are available to you in the 3DStreet app. The first tool that we'll cover is going to be this hand tool, and what this allows you to do is to move around your 3D streetscape without accidentally moving around any of the street elements. You can also change your camera angle during this tool by holding down your shift key to adjust the angle. Next tool is going to be the movement tool, which is indicated by the 4 arrow icon. You can select this tool from the toolbar down below by also selecting the W key on your keyboard. This tool allows you to select a street element and alter its position using the arrows or the properties panel on the right side, which when closed is this little cube and opens up to have all these different adjustments. This allows you to alter the street element a little bit more precisely by using coordinates as opposed to just the arrows. Additionally, you can alter the rotation and scale in this as well. The next tool is the rotation tool, which can be selected from the bottom toolbar or by selecting E on your keyboard. This allows you to alter the rotation of a street element. The next tool is the add-in tool. This is going to be the plus sign inside of the square in the toolbar below. And by selecting this, it'll appear with several tabs for different kinds of 3D models of bicycles, people, vehicle types, lots of public transportation options, and some fun stuff like tuk-tuks. Next, we're going to have dividers and traffic control. That's going to be different kinds of safety bumps, street signs, and anything that you're looking to do when you're developing a traffic pattern. Next is going to be sidewalk props. So you'll see things like parklets, lamps, bus stops, and other fun stuff that you can add into a streetscape to create a more dynamic environment. Next is going to be streets and intersections. This is going to allow you to create larger streetscapes that might be a little bit more indicative of what you're actually working with, as well as allowing you to play with different kinds of traffic patterns side by side. Next is going to be different kinds of buildings. This will allow you to create more dimensional streetscapes, as well as adding in any kinds of buildings that you think are missing. Lastly, inside of the add-in, you can go to custom layers. This has a few different options, allowing you to add in different kinds of 3D models that you may have developed outside of the 3DStreet app, as well as creating a nice primitive flat area that you can add extra buildings into and play with as you please. Next, I want to review some of the keyboard shortcuts that exist in the 3DStreet app. First is going to be by selecting the W key. It's going to open up the movement control, allowing you to alter the position of anything without having to go down into the toolbar. Next is going to be the keyboard shortcut E, which will open up your rotation control for any sorts of street elements that you're working with. Next is going to be by selecting R. This will allow you to change the scale of objects across their different axes. Next is going to be F, which will center us on any object that we have selected. For example, if I select this parklet and then click F, I will center up on it, allowing us to get a nice view of it without having to move around the camera too cumbersomely. Next will be G, which will open up a grid in the center part of your streetscape, allowing you to place things with a little bit more precision and symmetry than you might just by placing them as you otherwise would. Next will be the delete shortcut, which can be done by, as long as you're selected under the movement control tool, by selecting any object, you can just press your delete key and that will remove the entity. When you have this little pop-up, you can just select OK and it will remove the entity. Alternatively, you can delete any street element by going into the properties panel and selecting delete, which is right next to duplicate, which will allow you to remove the street entity. If you did want to duplicate a street element, you could merely select it and then alter its position, and that'll allow you to have those two. The next keyboard shortcuts are going to be in our number keys. The first will be by selecting 2. We get a backside shot of one side of the street, and then by selecting 3, we'll flip to the other side of the street, allowing us to see it from that side. 4 is going to show us an above view, otherwise known as the plan view, which can be selected in the top of the page. Next is going to be 5, which is going to show us a bottom view of our streetscape. And then 6 is going to show us this sort of blanked out down the street. 7 is going to show us that from the other side of the streetscape. And then those will be our 7 different camera shots that we sort of have access to. To return to the original camera shot, or what otherwise might be the default, you can simply press the 1 key, and that'll bring you back into what we're used to working in. The next thing I want to review is going to be the Layers tab. Now, the Layers tab is going to usually be open. However, if you ever wanted to close it for any reason, you can simply select the arrow. To open it back up, simply click on the layers, and that'll open it right back up. The first is going to be the geospatial layers. We'll review this here in a moment when I go over how to drop your 3D streetscape into the geospatial features that 3D Street has to offer. Next up is going to be the environment. Ambient light is not likely something that we're ever going to be interacting with. However, if you did want to reimagine what your streetscape might look like at a different time of day, with the sunlight coming from a different direction, you can select on the directional light and alter its position using the properties panel. And you could simply move this around by changing its position. We'll put this at 50, and now we've altered the direction that our shadow is coming from. We could do something like 0, so that way we have it as more of a high noon operation where the sunlight's coming from directly above, and we can sort of play with the kinds of shadows that are being cast by the light source in our 3D rendering. Next is going to be the user layers. This one is going to be where the majority of work is done. Within this, you'll be able to see each additional layer packet that'll include all of the street elements. For example, if we were to add in a street or intersection, it's going to pop up as its own individual packet of street elements. So that way things stay organized and they don't end up overbearingly in one of those single layer packets. An additional benefit of this is that if for some reason we wanted to remove this street area, we don't have to go and find all those individual street elements underneath the user layers. Instead, that entire packet is going to be something that we can simply click on delete to remove that entire section of our streetscape. Within this, once we select whatever that main and default streetscape area that we're working with, every single one of the street elements that we have the ability to edit is going to pop up underneath this. So there's going to be a whole bunch of different ones, and this can be pretty hard to navigate when you are originally getting in there and interacting with this. And this might be where it's a little bit more helpful to name those items inside of the properties panel. So that way you know which ones you're working with, which ones you're interacting with. However, when you select an item out of the layers tab, it will appear as selected on the streetscape so that you know what you're working with. For example, if we wanted to remove this excess ground over here, we could simply select it in the layers tab, select delete, and it's going to remove that whole section of ground over there. So we focus up exclusively on this. That will particularly come in handy when we're going to drop our streetscape into the geospatial area. All right, now we're going to bring all of what we've learned today into one single go, and we're going to actually load our streetscape using the Geospatial Pro here at the end. So I've gone ahead and created a Streetmix that I think would be really cool. And what we're going to go ahead and do is click Open in 3D Street, or we can copy our link here, hit Open, Load from Streetmix, copy in our link, and we're going to get this loaded up. Now the next thing we're going to go do is head down, title our piece. We're going to do 15th and agate. Now we've got it titled. We're going to go ahead and set a location. We've got our location loaded up here already. However, if you don't have it already typed in, you can go ahead and type in any location in here and it'll search it up. Alternatively, you could pull the coordinates from an application like Google Maps and load them in here, and it's going to set the center location. If you'd like to adjust this once you've got it opened up, you can go ahead and do so. So once we've done that, we'll click Update Scene Location. Once we have loaded in our streetscape into the 3D Geospatial Pro, there's a few adjustments that we're going to want to make. The first I'm going to do is go ahead and uncheck the building and blocks container, so that way I can remove those from the streetscape so we can have a little bit more clean and focus purely on our street orientation. The next thing I'm going to do is select the entire Streetmix container and go ahead and use our rotation tool and go ahead and set it in the correct orientation that I'm hoping the Streetmix to be in. It's looking good. Now we'll use our movement control, drop it in, make sure it's a little bit more flush with the ground. And I think that's looking pretty good. And now what we have is a super cool 3D street rendering that we can share with our stakeholders to get a really cool idea about what a renewed agate street outside of Autzen Stadium could look like if that was something that we are interested in doing. I encourage you to just play around with the software and remember to share these really cool streetscapes that you're doing, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.